Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today is Bhakti Wednesday. So we are going to continue looking at all of the 8 verses of the Śrī Śikṣāṣṭakam, which is a special prayer that we have been exploring verse by verse throughout the series of 6 videos so far. This is the 7th. There's one more after this verse that we're looking at this week. So you don't have to have listened to all of the previous videos to get something out of this, but I do recommend listening to all of them so you can get a gist for what the whole prayer is about. Any of the verses standalone are beautiful, but you get the full context when you listen to all of it. In the description of this video, you are going to find the audio version of the prayer that I sing, as well as a link to the translation of the Bengali/Sanskrit language. So you can check those out if you'd like to. What I do is I'm going to sing through the entire prayer, and then we're going to focus today on the 7th verse of the prayer, and I'll put the translation of the verse up, read it to you, read it again, and then offer some reflections on this verse as we keep going through it. We've called this series Even God Likes to Pray because Lord Chaitanya, the author of this prayer, is said to be an incarnation of God, of Krishna, in the Krishna Bhakti tradition. And so from that standpoint, it's interesting to reflect on the way in which God prays, that even God likes to pray, that there is enjoyment and satisfaction in prayer even for God. It's not something that's just done by people who stand miles apart from the divine. Prayer is like dancing. Prayer is a form of intimacy that even God enjoys, that even the divine can enjoy within itself, so to speak. And through us also, the aspects of God, parts and parcels of God. So it's a way of understanding prayer as communion of source with source, of all the different beings communing with the great being of which they are a part. So from that standpoint, I'm going to sing the prayer, and then we'll reflect more on this 7th verse today. Cheto darpana marjanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam shreyaha kairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadu jivanam anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamrita svadanam sarvatma snapanam param vijayate Śrī Krishna Sankirtanam Namakardi Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakalaha Itadrasi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaivam Idrisam Ihajani Nanuragaha Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahisnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagarisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvare Bhavatad Bhaktira Haituki Tvai Ayinanda Tanunja Kinkaram Patitamam Vishame Bhavam Budau Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja Shtitaduli Sadrisam Vichintaya Nayanam Galada Shudaraya Vadanam Gadgadarudaya Gira Pulakir Nichitam Vapukadam Tavanama Grahane Bhavishyati Yugyayatam Namishena Chakshusha pravrishayatam Shunyayatam jagat sarvam Govinda virahe name Ashlishava paradatam pinashtimam Adarshanan marmahatam karotu va Yatatata va vidahato lampato Mat prananatas sa eva na paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Gaura Premanandi, Hare Bol. So the 7th verse goes like this, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. My Lord Govinda, because of separation from you, I consider even a moment a great millennium. Tears flow from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I can see the entire world as void. My Lord Govinda, because of separation from you, I consider even a moment a great millennium. Tears flow from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I can see the entire world as void. I love this verse, and on the surface, I think it says one thing, while if you spend time with it, at least the way I guess that I've spent time with it, it says a lot more. On the surface, it's a beautiful way of saying how profoundly painful it is to feel disconnected from our source. That when you're not, I mean, I'll just put it in like an everyday way. I mean, I'm certainly not at the level of Lord Chaitanya here where, you know, a moment feels like a millennium and I'm just bawling because of, you know, like I don't have that level of spiritual connection yet in my life. Though I've had glimpses of it. There are times when I've prayed in meditation and mantra meditation, and the feeling of being disconnected from love, from God's love, from divinity, and from people I love, from myself, from kindness, from divine qualities, I realize what a barren place I'm living in psychically. And there's great pain in that. And there's also this release, this, how have I drifted so far? How have I fallen so far from the temple of love in my heart? That's God's place in my heart. How have I gotten so far from it? And when you realize that sometimes that feeling of separation is so intense that you cry and you break down. And it's that feeling like, it's a good feeling. It's not a bad feeling. When you feel that ache of separation and how far and lonely and empty things are when you're just in your own head and forgetting that tenderness or that love or affection that keeps you connected to God and to other people. And you realize that it's so painful to realize where we've put ourselves, you know, but it's so good. It feels like rain is, when you start crying, you really realize it, you know, it's like rain is falling. And it feels so good because that crying is like the clouds bursting over a dry place and starting to water it. And you can feel that too. It's like painful, but like relieving, you know? And I love, like, I don't know about you guys, but that happens to me, like, you know, not all the time, but like there are at least a few times a year where I hit a space where I go through long periods of weeks, sometimes a month or two, where I'm a dried up heart, you know? And then suddenly it's like it dawns on me in a moment of prayer, meditation, mantra meditation every day. And suddenly the tears start coming, and I just realize, like, where I've been out in the desert, man, you know, I've been in a void place, kind of a barren wasteland in my own heart and mind and soul. How did it come to this? Where has the sweetness gone? And it's painful and the tears come down, and then you feel good. It feels good to feel that separation, because in the separation is you know, the sweetness. It's like being away from someone you love. The absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I love that here's God talking about that experience and the sweetness of feeling disconnected and coming back. And that, I think it's really, really important to pause and go, that's God having that experience. Even God has that experience. Because what that does when we realize that, is we realize that there is something of a reflection in our own isolation, in the barren places that we travel, in the wastelands that we travel, of our own spirit. You know, those places are part of how we start developing this sweet, loving connection. You know, this sense of separation, this feeling of emptiness, is a part of the rasa, or it's part of the lila, or the play of the soul with God. And that it's beautiful to have that experience. It's not, well, you messed up, you're fallen, you're in a barren wasteland. What a mess up you've made. It can feel that way, but then, when the grace and mercy start raining down and you realize you've been disconnected and you long to return, and that feeling of relief that comes, say, with the tears or whatever, that moment is a merciful moment. It's a moment of feeling like that connection has always been there. It's never gone anywhere. And you develop some kind of spiritual endurance and an appreciation for all the different textures and seasons of life. I mean, as someone who meditates every day, I'll tell you that the dry patches for me are not gone by any stretch. They're very regular that I hit long dry patches. But what I have learned over time with sticking with a spiritual practice of connecting to the divine is that those wildernesses are very meaningful part of a love language that's being developed between my soul and the divine. And I suspect it's that way for everyone. I mean, look, it appears to be that way for God. Isn't that so nice? Isn't that so relieving? I'm so inspired by that. That really captures my faith, to know that God itself is being like, look, this is part of it. And it's a beautiful part of it. It's a part of how our intensity and our intimacy grows and develops. And we can move from a relatively more ignorant version of that separation into a much more enlightened understanding of all of our experiences and why certain periods of separation come, and there's separation and return. Like, we can start to appreciate those experiences as part of this growing intimacy. So it's the same in relationships. Sometimes you're really close. Sometimes you're kind of doing your separate things. And if you learn to trust those different phases, they each become appreciated equally in a way. And it's spiritually, that's what we're moving toward, is this kind of dance that we're doing, and to appreciate that every experience we have is facilitated through grace to help us deepen the connection. Anyway, in Christianity, there's a similar concept. Jesus and the Apostle Paul, I think it was in the book of Philippians, talks about how Jesus emptied himself in order to become fully human. Kenosis, emptying yourself of. So he emptied himself of like the sort of divine light in order to become identified with that separation state, so that God is there too, And this is why Maya, the word for illusion and separation, also means mercy. This place, if we understand it correctly, is like a nursery of stars being born. Everything's here facilitating our spiritual growth, even what appears to be tremendous darkness and ignorance. It's not to justify it. It's just to keep the encouraging perspective alive within our hearts. Anyway, Jesus said to empty himself to become fully human. And he also said those who want to keep their life, secure it and keep it, will lose it. And those who lose their life, who empty it out, will find it. Here's God emptied, separate, longing. In that state, there's crystal clear sense of what's valuable and beautiful and true. So similarly, like, part of the practice of prayer is not about successfully connecting with God, but emptying ourselves over and over and over, so that we might become more aware of that distance and separation, because it's the means by which we grow closer. Well, you can't feel that unless you fail. So much of mantra meditation, in my limited experience in daily prayer for my whole lifetime, is about failure. But it's about starting to relish failure as the means by which grace and mercy and compassion and understanding and softness and gentleness of heart and soul are emerging. And eventually, maybe we become like Lord Chaitanya, where that state of feeling emptied out and separate becomes an actual source of ecstasy. That's high level stuff. I'm not saying I'm anywhere near it, but I get the feeling that's what that verse is about. So anyway, I hope you find this useful. Just some thoughts here. I'm by no means, any great bhakti teacher, but I am so glad to share the little, insights and nuggets in this prayer that have meant something to me. So I hope that they mean something to you as well. And if you have any requests for special topics as we're nearing the end of this series, you can always email info@nightlightastrology.com and feel free to put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line and ask a question. We'll be doing some more Q&A episodes eventually after the series is over. All right, anyway, we'll have one more verse left in the prayer we'll do next week. So until then, Hare Krishna, everyone.